Welcome to the Motivation Insiders podcast, where we explore best practices for designing, implementing, and measuring incentive, recognition, and loyalty programs. We look at motivation with an exclusive view, well, from the inside. This is an ongoing podcast designed and produced by the IESP, the Incentive Engagement Solutions Providers of the Incentive Marketing Association. I'm Lincoln Smith, board member of the IESP and CEO of Motiforce. Let's dive into today's episode.
Welcome to Motivation Insiders, the podcast powered by the Incentive Marketing Association and the Incentive and Engagement Solution Providers, the IESP. I'm your host, MacDonald from VIBE SMG, current board member of the IESP and a longtime advocate of the IMA. And today we're diving into a topic that is shaping the future of our entire industry. For decades, incentive and recognition programs were built largely on intuition, tradition, and best practices that have been passed down over time. And while so much of that wisdom still matters, we're now operating in a world where data, analytics, and AI-powered tools give us a much clearer picture of what actually drives engagement and behavior. This episode, The Data-Driven Revolution in Incentives and Recognition, How Analytics and AI Are Shaping Modern Program Design, we explore how organizations are evolving from gut feel decision-making to insight-driven strategy. We'll talk about the metrics that matter, how predictive analytics is being used to anticipate participant behavior, and how AI is influencing program evolution. To guide us through this conversation, I'm thrilled to be joined by two exceptional leaders who are both a strategic industry perspective, who will both provide a strategic industry perspective and real-world program experience. First, we have Kim Huffman, Vice President of Talent, Learning, and Culture at VCA Animal Hospitals. Kim leads HR strategy across one of the largest veterinary hospital networks in North America, supporting a diverse and highly distributed workforce. She has a deep experience implementing recognition, culture, and engagement initiatives at scale. And Kimberly also serves as President of the Board of Directors of Recognition Professionals International, a strategic industry group within the IMA. Hi, Kim.
Hey, how's everybody doing? Nice to be here.
Good, doing great, thank you. Our second guest is Richelle Suver, Managing Director of 110, a leading provider of incentive engagement solutions. Richelle oversees client strategy and program design for organizations across multiple industries. She brings a wealth of experience in analytics, behavioral insights, and using data to optimize incentives and drive performance. Her vantage point spans hundreds of programs, making her an ideal industry perspective for today's discussion. Hi, Richelle.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining. So this is a conversation I've been very excited to have. As I was mentioning kind of off air, within the industry, we talk a lot about these topics, right? About how, as solution providers, we can guide our clients along, how we can really show the proof that our insights are guiding their programs in the right direction. And what's been a very difficult thing for us to do in the past is getting those insights. It's been really hard to dive into them. We often have to get in line with technical people to then try to ask questions and decipher the information to then provide those insights. So things have changed over the last couple of years. We're now at the forefront of being able to do that on our own. So I'm very excited to hear how other people are diving into that type of an opportunity. And I want us to get started on a bit of a data aha moment, and just to show the value of what insights can provide within that type of conversation. An example, one that I share often, is we have a client in the sales incentive side. They're a manufacturer, and they had an indirect sales channel program, and we had our quarterly business review lined up and had an opportunity not only to speak with our program owners, but they brought in some executives. And when we sat down to our presentation, the executives said that in the field, from their own reps, they said that the program wasn't something that was often being used. The perspective was that it was a ho-hum type of an initiative. But what we're able to provide to them was to say, you know what, you're actually a little wrong here. This is a kind of a best-in-class program. People are participating not only in terms of redemptions and logins, but in earnings, in sales, everything is trending upwards. What that provided to them was not only an eye-opening moment, but the interesting part is it actually opened up their ears to what we were suggesting to them moving forward, right? How could they leverage that type of engagement that they didn't know existed based on what the data was able to provide? So that's one example that we see. And I'd love to ask you, Kim, to start. Can you describe a moment where there was an aha moment where data changed your perspective on what team members, what the organization really needed from recognition or engagement programs?
Oh, I mean, we use data all the time. And one of the things that I could share that the data that was most relevant to us was when we actually went out and asked our associates what they wanted from that data. So we were doing recognition programs with the things that we always thought that the associates wanted. But when we asked them, we found out that they liked t-shirts. They wanted swag. So here we were really putting tons of dollars into initiatives that we thought that they liked, but we really didn't know until we asked them. And so that really changed the directory of focusing on what people want. It's by region, the personalisation. It really changed a lot of our programs.
All right, so getting right to the source and asking them to get those insights. It's a great strategy that way. And a lot easier with technology these days.
Yes, because of technology, we were able to ask. I mean, at that list, we had 20,000 locations, 180,000 stores. So to be able to, by region, say what those want, to be able to deliver that information to leaders was extremely helpful when talking about recognition.
Excellent. Now, Richelle, you're going to provide a bit of a different perspective on this. So your question is going to be slightly different. Is to say, is there a moment similar to the example that I described, but more relevant perhaps to your experiences? Was there a moment where data changed your perspective on either how well a client's program was working or perhaps how not so well it was working?
Yes, we actually had an example, I would say 2 years ago. It was related to a channel incentive program. The client was a major computer equipment distributor, and they are a large, well-known organization. They had sophisticated business intelligence people that worked for them. They were analyzing their programs on their own, but they engaged 110 to give them a second perspective. And it was actually quite an advanced AI usage. It was using topographical data models, which is something that goes beyond my sphere of influence. But we were able to get the data scientists to analyze 3 years of their program incentive data, which obviously helped to give us history. But in doing so, we were able to predict 20% more accurately than their own team was able to predict the efficacy of those programs. And it showed us that there were certain programs that were not working, which we shined a light on for the client. And we said, hey, these programs that are designed or running in a particular way are not making you money. So if you were to end running those and reinvest those in the more effective programs, it would be money well spent. And so they took our advice, they did so, and it saved them millions of dollars in pushing those marketing investments towards more effective programs.
That's excellent, and that's awesome. I love that type of insight, right? I mean, more isn't always better, and the status quo isn't always better. So getting that type of information out to our clients definitely provides that value that we're looking for.
Right.
So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So on that topic, we discussed a couple of different elements here, and they both center around kind of the metrics. One being the efficacy of the program, and then the other is more on the preference of program participants. So Kimberly, I'm going to shift the focus a little bit here to metrics and say, so when you're leading a recognition program at the scale that you've had an opportunity to run with such a diverse workforce across a huge network, so what are some of the metrics that you found that matter the most when you're evaluating the effectiveness of your recognition programs?
Well, the measurement is extremely important. A lot of times when people talk recognition programs, they think it's the warm and fluffy things, and it's not. It truly is a business strategy, but you have to be able to connect it back to the data in the company to really be able to show the value of it, and then that helps for future investment. So the things, I mean, some of them you mentioned, Carl, like the usage, the repetition, like are people going in there and using it? Like that's good baseline data. But when we really see the funding come through and the connection made is when we can see it in manager effectiveness. If I can build a program that it's easy for our leaders to use, and then we see their manager effectiveness scores go up and engagement, when we see retention go up. And again, these might not be apple to apple comparisons, but when you have the data behind the scenes and you can connect it, one of the best metrics we've ever were able to utilize is we were able to connect recognition engagement metrics to our customer service scores. So I could say if a team is more engaged, their customer service scores will be X higher, and that easily transitioned into dollar amount in value. So measurement is something, we don't launch a program unless we can measure it, because we won't be able to sustain it if we can't.
Right. And would you say that that type of evaluation has become easier?
Definitely easier, but we're not there yet. It still takes a lot longer and a lot easier, and you have to be able to connect the data behind the scenes. So we're getting better, but not there yet.
Yeah, and that sounded like I was downplaying the how difficult it would be to do that on such a larger scale. But yeah, that's great. That does sound like it would be incredibly valuable. The manager effectiveness score. Are you seeing a direct tie-in between increased recognition initiatives and manager effectiveness?
100%. Like the more effective leaders you have, and then that also transitions to customer service, because recognition at scale, like you can have the best program in the world, but if your leaders don't use it, then it's not good. So like that's how, and people want to hear the word thank you. So it's amazing whenever you can see a large scale program, easy enough for our leaders to adopt it and use it, and then that's when you see that data come in.
Excellent. So I think Richelle and I will say these things, and we actually have some information to back it up. But to hear it from a practitioner's perspective is always nice to have that additional boost. So now, Richelle, on your end, when you work with clients, what are some of the metrics that you find are most frequently misunderstood or misused?
Okay, so misunderstood or misused, I would say, all begins with the quality of the data. The old adage, garbage in, garbage out is key here. So to Kim's point, you must be collecting multiple data points, have a clear picture of what it is that you need to collect up front. For example, many companies will say this program didn't work, but they forget to analyze what other factors may have been occurring that could have impacted the success of that program. It could be that the program was designed well, but it was poorly communicated, leading to low adoption and confusion in the audience that they were trying to target. So I think it's just important to understand when you evaluate these programs, not to look at one factor or one data point, because it's likely not giving you the full picture.
Absolutely. And that's a great point. These kind of vanity metrics that the old traditional easy to calculate values like logins, redemption rates, things like that, earnings, if they're not put into context, to your point, or if we're not tying them all together, they don't necessarily lead to the full picture of the actual program itself. Running many programs doesn't necessarily mean that the program is successful, so identifying those things is hugely important.
Yes.
So I'm going to step into the next conversation, which is looking at what you just talked about, which is what is either misused or not delved into and deep enough. The next question for you, Richelle, is so what are some of the major data and analytics trends that you feel are shaping incentives and recognition program design going into 2026?
Sure. I think that there's a few. I would start with real-time insights via dashboards for admins. Again, Kim touched on this, is that leadership needs access to information. And what AI has provided us, or even just data these days, the speed of it is available faster. So having that at a glance for your C-suite or for your program owners is very important from an administrative perspective. The second thing is just overall program health checks. We live in a world where you can't just set it and forget it any longer. We always tell clients to look at minimum quarterly. I really, would suggest monthly, but you don't just set up a program and let it run and see what happens. So I think data being used in some regular cadence to measure the outcomes that you set forth in the beginning is very important. The third thing would be for engagement and recognition programs even is ensuring the teams and the managers are all actively using the program. Data serves as a very important tool to uncover issues that you might have. Maybe certain regions are engaged, others are not. That will give you insight to whether or not you have a manager issue or a communications issue. So data is a really helpful tool in helping make sure everyone is using the program in the same manner. And last but not least, I would say AI allows us to do data analytics and predictive modeling for futures. That was something that, sure, we could do through business intelligence teams manually with the data, but instead of having weeks to analyze and scour through those sorts of things, we have it in seconds.
Excellent. You kind of beat me to it. I was going to ask you how,
Oh, sorry.
how 110 was using that type of information, but that's great.
Yeah.
To dovetail into what you just talked about, and I think where we're both heading with this is that, the topic is, we call it personalization of program information and data. What I'll call it something a little bit different, which is relevance, right? Relevancy of the information that a participant is exposed to within the program. So that either at the manager level, at the program, at the kind of individual level, that they're seeing information that's relevant to them, not only just in data, but also past performance, opportunities for themselves, right? It's not just about doing a kind of a broad blanket approach for programs. You're looking at tailoring the information so that you can either offer opportunities for improvement. So if that's on the recognition side, perhaps there's lower scores in either learning or in engagement rates or in different types of recognition. And then the sales incentive side, that could be targeting very specific promotions or behaviors targeted to the individual rather than just doing it for everyone, right? Things that are not relevant to you within the channel space that you're not actively selling yourself on an ongoing basis, that may not be relevant to you and your opportunities. So looking at that type of information, that data and predictive modeling to say, and looking backwards to say, Carl's never actually sold this type of product. It probably doesn't make sense for his region. So let's look at what he has sold in the past and tailor perhaps an opportunity for him based on that information. So that's where we're seeing a lot of our trends and what people are asking for, and where we're seeing a lot of the value to provide that measurable impact. So Kimberly, on your end, what are some of the ways in which your team is leveraging, I know that you touched on it a little bit, but what are some of the ways that your team is leveraging AI and other analytical tools to evaluate program effectiveness? Can you dive in a little bit, maybe a bit more specifically, or anything else that you can speak to?
Sure, there's so many different ways. I had to think about that one for a minute. Some of the ways are very tactical when I say using data, but being able to, like when Richelle said dashboards and instantaneous, and having leaders have access to it, that's so helpful because when we can put it into the leaders' hands and they can see what's happening in their region or division or whatever, that empowers them to lead differently or make changes. Also, and again, like I said, tactical, but just very real, is being able to easily do downloads or Excel downloads of the data and to sort in different ways. That's just something that we have found, whenever we want to celebrate the recognition, that we have found the best use of working with companies that we can easily extract that data and use ourselves, or we can see it in a dashboard, right? It has multifunctional use. One area that we're diving into that I'm really excited about is being able to look at sentiment and recognition and what topics are being brought up through the AI. Because again, when you have a multiple location dispersed organization, they don't always see the recognition happening. So we want to break down those walls and show the recognition where they can see all the recognition coming in, where they can see it, where we can look at the sentiment on the back end and then be able to, as you mentioned, that personalization, how do we dig in by region or things to see, is there something bubbling up that we want to recognize on a broader level or something we need to look at? So I think those are some of the ways. The other area that we are just starting to look into is onboarding, and how do we help improve the experience through AI nudges. How do we recognize at the right moments that matter? And we're hoping to gain data through the AI. And I guess the last piece that I would say that we haven't delved into yet, but we are hoping to, is, and this can be a little bit controversial, I think, but having AI help with writing recognition. Not that they should write the recognition, it needs to come from the leader, but if you could have a nudge for somebody who hasn't maybe done this or hasn't practiced to say, hey, can you make this more specific? Can you add this to it? That'll make it much more meaningful. So how can we help teach our leaders in real time through AI?
Yeah, that's very interesting, and the concept of the identifying the real-time opportunities for learning or for educational opportunity is huge. The one thing that I've said for a long time, and I hope it to be the case in a lot of people's minds into 2026, is that AI is a support tool. It's not an execution tool, right? You still need to have that human element to it that understands context and what's important to say that. So I am very much looking forward to hearing how well your AI recognition writing module goes. Certainly looking forward to hearing that. We haven't crossed that threshold within our programs yet of doing that. So I'm curious to hear how that goes ultimately. Okay. So now that we've talked a little bit about how we've evaluated program success and how we're kind of shaping and leveraging some of the tools at our disposal, Kimberly, can you tell me an example of perhaps a program change that you have made as a result of some of the analytics or behavioral insights that you got from programs?
Some of the So one of the biggest changes we have made, and I'm thinking back to an example from my previous life, is it was around, again, digging into what really motivated our associates and what they needed. And so it was around, it all comes back to personalization. I don't know how, maybe not by individual, but even by groups or the cultures of, again, and I work in multi-unit, whether it's stores, whether it's hospitals. And so we have this great company culture, but then you have that micro culture within the hospital. And so how do you get in and meet those? And so when we were looking at some of the programs, it was working really well in pockets and it wasn't working well in pockets. And so when we dug in, it went into they wanted to be able to have the leeway to be able to choose what they want instead of just the company saying, here's this thing for you. And so we were able to utilize, and this one is food related, but for the specific example, be able to go to local areas that made sense for them. Did they want a potluck? Did they want food catered in? Did they like certain food areas? And so we were able to use the data to kind of regionalize things that instead would have been a peanut butter approach. And to be able to do that on a 20,000 location or even 100 or 1,000 locations was just, it wouldn't have been possible without the data to help us get there.
I like that. The visualization of the microculture and also looking at a microclimate within programs, right? Of understanding kind of what's relevant within that audience to shape and look at it.
And something just to add to that about that, is we use the data on the back end to get the the virtual connection, right? But there are frontline employees in stores and hospitals. And so we use the data to be able to, how can we get them multifaceted ways? So if we recognize them in a platform that's online, can we get that on a phone? Can we get that to print in a certificate that you could put on a board somewhere? So leveraging the data, I guess, in the back end and the different ways that we can utilize technology to use one recognition piece and multiple different ways, depending on what means most to that team.
So that's great. I appreciate that that level of detail. I'm pulling back on some additional questions because I do want to flow into Richelle with the next one, but I have a couple of follow-ups. Richelle, from your perspective, what are you seeing as the most common data challenges that organizations are struggling with, and how do solution providers like ourselves help to overcome that?
Yeah, that is a tough one. Access to data, particularly in large organizations, when you consider they have many regions, many divisions, they could be domestic as well as global. The data can be fragmented, and it is hard for program owners to collect it. I do think that the quality of your data is really important for the quality of your reporting and your AI. So we're not totally there yet. I think everyone though has been educated in that the importance of that mission, but honestly, it's still hard for program owners to get their hands on it. Without going through their IT department
Yep.
or different divisions. So it's a real challenge.
And I agree, and that's exact 100% what we're seeing as well. Is 110 like Vibe able to kind of allow that level of access? Are you then, have you then allowed them to understand that the data that you have is pretty clean compared to what they have access to, and providing them that level of insight?
It's funny you say that because we've been told on more than one occasion by, Fortune level companies that we have better data than they do due to the fact that everything is running through our platforms and it's centralized. So once you get over that hurdle of getting your hands on the right pieces of information and it's flowing through your system, it's very sticky. It's very valuable to these organizations that are looking to make quick decisions.
Absolutely. One of the things that we see in a lot of channel programs is oftentimes these organizations don't always know which individual person is selling their products, right? They don't
Yes.
have that access, that visibility into Mike at the storefront. That's
Right.
a real champion for the brand. So it's quite fitting that you would mention that the data does become clear, because it does provide a clearer perspective in terms of what their channel looks like, what their audience looks like, because they are getting that level of access they didn't have before. They didn't have that leverage. So that's quite interesting. I want to go back to the topic of KPIs and data just a little bit, because I forgot to ask it, to be quite
Okay.
honest. But it's I think it's relevant to both of you, and I'm just going to broadly ask it, and if someone wants to raise their hand to go first. But the question is, do you feel that organizations are focusing on the right KPIs today, or are we still learning what good looks like?
Yeah, I mean, my answer is I think each company and industry has its own nuances. So good will not be the same for everyone. But I do think the KPIs that make sense for almost every type of company is the ability to measure incremental sales revenue if you're looking at an incentive program. Increased program engagement would be the second, and that applies to both recognition and incentives. Having this ability to measure, attain, and set up overall targets, whether that's growth targets, engagement targets, they could be tied to your core values. And I think right now for incentives, having the ability to move the middle, that is the performers that are not at the top of your bell curve, because those A players are always going to be the A players. But how do you look at that next segment down and urge them or encourage them to become a top performer? To me, in the incentive world is where everyone should be looking.
I wholeheartedly agree. I can add to that. Like I think we're still learning what good looks like because we're getting more access to data.
Right.
In my mind, is that connections that you can make by Richelle, what you mentioned with your dashboard, everything being connected and getting that robust data. Just not being able to have access to that before made it harder to get that stuff. Like I was saying with the analytics I talked about, you made me rewind. I'm like, yeah, that was like a people analytics team that did that, and it took weeks to get it. And now you can do a lot of it in a dashboard, but you have to set it up right. And so the one thing that I'd say that I really value in a provider company is helping us to slow down and get the right information up front, pull in the right pieces, like think through how are you going to measure this. That's where we've seen the most impact whenever our vendor has been like, okay, wait a minute, maybe you want to add this in because later you could look at this. And like, hey, I think Richelle mentioned like quarterly, monthly, like engagements, like how do they help prepare us for that? Like if they send us like a download of the information and things to be able to have more robust conversations with our leadership and share that broadly. I think right now a lot of it is behind the scenes and dashboards, and we need to do a better job of sharing that out, connecting that across to other metrics or finding ways to pull that in so we can move that middle, like Richelle said. That is where I truly believe that recognition is underutilized as a business strategy in helping humans motivate them through the behaviors that we want to see.
Yeah, I agree.
So I couldn't agree anymore that the middle 60s is where you need to go. And I'm curious, Kim, as providers, we'll always have an opportunity, I think always take an opportunity to pick your brain. When you've been provided with that, those great conversations with your providers in terms of, what to consider and how to move forward with evolving your program, do you feel, have things gone from traditional industry benchmarking into more relevant and more specific or personalized to the organization type of benchmarking? Are you still seeing benchmarking as a common trend?
I am not seeing that as much as a common trend. I do think that that's an area, and I feel a little bit bad saying this, but I just want to be real in this, is that we need help. Like, I don't think I get a lot of, hey, here's this benchmark data, here's how you're standing up to it. Like, it's like extras, the add-on stuff. And so if I could have a vendor that could really provide that information in a summary type format, a lot of our time is spending as somebody saying, hey, what is this? And we have to go pull it ourselves or wait for a quarterly report or build it ourselves. And I can't get to the conversation because we're just trying to get the data in a way that somebody can understand it, right? So to me, that's the biggest miss for KPIs. And it's the provider and us working to what is the measurement that we want to see. Let's set that up on the front end of what success looks like and then help us follow through with that. Because to your point, you can't set it and forget it. You have to constantly look at it. We're evolving.
Good, and that's great insights, and it does echo a lot of it with some of the conversations. I'm sure, Richelle, you as well, conversations you've had with your clients to say, how well are we doing? What does this actually mean? What do these numbers mean? Where is the comparable that says, you know what, you're in line, you are best in class, you're a little bit low in this particular scale, and I think those are great conversations to have initially, right? You're setting a benchmark based on an industry trend, a size of organization, some of the KPIs that are shared. I think where the evolution is, and Richelle maybe back me up or correct me, is in taking the benchmarking and going from industry benchmarking to self-benchmarking, right? And looking at where you have come from and where you're kind of going based on your own objectives and your own initiatives that you've designed and implemented. And
I agree with you. I would say benchmarking is one of the top questions that we get asked. And on one hand, I would say from an industry perspective, it's quite fascinating. If you type in anything into ChatGPT nowadays, you can get some insights depending on how you write your prompt. But I think that's why organizations also like the Incentive Marketing Association and others in our space, which are unbiased third parties, can add a lot of value. Being able to bring forward not just what 110 has seen in the marketplace, but what they see on the whole. And so, I think that we are getting more sophisticated in that, but it continues to be a very popular client question for sure.
Absolutely. Good. Well, thank you for that. So I'm going to dive into one of the aspects that is so important as it relates to not just data and analytics and figuring out how we want to evolve the program, but in communication and how to best communicate shifts in programs. It's not fully related to data necessarily, but hugely important. I think, Richelle, you were talking about a little bit earlier, or perhaps Kim as well, and the importance of communication shifts. So how would you recommend, or what are some of the best practices that you found in terms of how you can communicate change that has come from some of the program data insights that you've gained from your program data?
I can start with this. A lot of again, what's so cool about recognition data, and I think I started at the beginning, is whenever you can, it comes from our associates, right? Like most of the data you get is who's using it, why are they using it, how are they using it, how does that add up? And so when you can, sorry, I just lost my train of thought because I got really excited about them using the data. But when we communicate that to say, hey, look, we're listening. We hear you. We can use this data and we can improve this and make this more of what you want. So the more you utilize this program and tell us, give us feedback on the program, we can take that and turn that into action. And that's a lot of the ways how we communicate the change, because if our associates don't want the change, then we need to question, are we making the right change? And if they don't, and if it's something that we need to do, we need to be able to share that why. Two other things I would mention is it takes somebody 7 times to really hear something. And so just communicating it once in an email is not enough. So you need to have that repetition. So what are we giving talking points to leaders? Are we sharing that why? Like, what are all the different ways that we can bring it up multiple times, talk about it on a global level as well as down to that individual? And then the last piece that I love with the new technology and things is nudges. We're able to nudge leaders if they haven't recognized their teams in a while, and then they can get reports of who was recognized on their team and who wasn't recognized. And so even in itself, I mean, people are typically good and they want to recognize, they want to do things. But when you get busy or you're under stress, like it's just sometimes it's the first thing that goes away, or you don't realize you're not doing it. And so having those nudges, and when we can turn those on and make those enhancements, it's a nice little just tap on the shoulder of, hey, you're a leader. Like, you need to reinforce something, let people know that they're doing a good job.
Oh, that's great. One interesting, sorry, before I switch over to you, Richelle, on the same topic, but you talked about it takes 7 times for someone to hear something or really have that sink in. One of the pieces of information that we gleaned from our data is in how to tailor our communications a little bit differently, right? So subject lines and variability of subject lines, changing that up and seeing the increase in read rates and then the increase in engagement, specifically for we have game campaigns. So if we're doing an incentive programs, we'll implement games. If you've qualified for something, you get a gameplay. These have an expiry date, so we constantly want people to come and play the game. So we noticed that every time that we sent out a communication with a different and more enticing subject line, perhaps using some behavioral, human behavioral traits like, scarcity and time is running out, this type of thing, we're seeing 10% engagement rate in game for every communication. So as you send it out, it kind of echoes what you're saying, Kim, and that the more that you're sending, the more you're communicating with creating a bit of urgency, you are getting that boost in engagement, just specifically for that case. So I thought that was an interesting tidbit there.
Love that.
How about you, Richelle, from a communication standpoint, what have you seen as kind of some of your best practices?
Well, I think between the two of you, you hit some of the things that I would reinforce, but I loved Kim's answer about the nudging and also the reminders that it takes 7 times. I mean, just in the world today, we have a lot of noise. I don't know what your inbox looks like, but mine is very full. And so are our employees. And there's this competition for attention. So how do you keep their attention? How do you keep them engaged? You mentioned nudging. We also do gamification. If there's something in the moment where you just want to capture their attention, maybe 3 months has passed and people have sort of gotten lackadaisical about the program or remembering to log in about the program, we'll give them that little incentive, if you will, to answer a survey, get a sentiment check, remind them that they have unredeemed points, whatever those little ticklers can be for your organization to make sure that they're actively engaged are super important. And when it comes to a channel program, you have to remember that if the target audience is not an employee, they're getting these communications from other competitors as well. So how do you stand out with your voice against the other guy, if you will? So all of that is really important. And I think generationally speaking as well, you need to remember that if you have a wide demographic in your population, different things, different tactics are more effective with different generations. And so a combination of digital, maybe text notifications, maybe good old-fashioned print works differently for different demographics.
Yeah, that's great feedback, and the variability of it, right? And what is going to be interesting to some won't be interesting to all. So that's a great way of looking at it. Also, interesting tidbit on the channel program side. A channel partner, channel sales rep, will have relationships with between 5 and 20 different partners. So to your
Wow.
point, how do you stand out from the crowd? And that's where a good provider can provide you that type of insight, right? How can you use some of those tools, to your point, Richelle, not only on how to communicate, what method, what may resonate, also what programs are going to resonate with the audience that's going to really make it stand out. So these are really interesting. Demographics a big part of that relevance and that personalization.
Yes.
Okay, I do have a fun one for both of you. Kimberly first. So, where do you see data and AI helping HR leaders like yourself make more impactful decisions? Let's keep it short and say next year. Where do you see all of these fun tools evolving that are going to help you and your fellow HR leaders?
I think that access to the data and the dashboards are going to help us make faster decisions and help us support our leaders better to help them create specific action plans to make movement in their market. Like we can use the data to do small things based on what it's telling us and what it's saying, and that's what matters is when they can see it.
Excellent.
That's what I'm most excited about.
Faster decisions and faster action does not
Yes.
usually is not usually associated with human resources. So I'm sure that is something that will be a nice change. I'm glad and I'm happy for our colleagues in HR.
Yes.
So Richelle, here's a fun one for you. If you could wave a magic wand and give every organization one data capability tomorrow, what would it be?
Well, I hate to sound redundant. I would love to say access as well. Centralization of data is a huge hurdle. So if I could wave a wand, I would urge every company to ensure that their program owners have the ability to get their hands on what they need, meaning the data, in a more efficient way. I understand there's compliance issues. I understand that there's a need to protect data privacy. But if we could crack that nut, my gosh, we would be head and shoulders ahead. And I guess just maybe other data suggestion so that I don't sound too repetitive is proficiency in using AI. I think we still need to remember that everyone is at a different stage in their AI journey, some more than others. And I think it is on the organization or the company itself to get a gauge of where their employees' comfort level is. Because if you're under tapping that resource, you're losing out. It does help with efficiency. It is an enabler. It is a tool. And so I would say in 2026, every company should do a proficiency test in AI and understand at what stage their teams are.
I love that, Richelle. I just want to add, like, AI, like, it's coming and it's here, and it can be so helpful as a tool. And the sooner that we can help teach people how to use it, the faster we'll be able to do it. And I think it'll provide great things. And I do think it's something that everybody's been somewhat either slow to adopt or, I don't know, but it's coming fast, and I'm excited.
Yeah, me too.
That's excellent. I'm going to add my little tidbit. My magic wand item is I really hope that everyone has a bit more clarity in understanding their own KPIs that are relevant to them. So often it's difficult to try to get that information from our clients, and even though we can kind of poke and prod, understanding where the organization wants to go specifically and in a targeted way is a lot harder than it should be. So I would wish that upon everybody, that they understand where they need to go, and then we can help them in teaching them how to get there.
That's great. Yeah, it's their strategy.
Perfect. Okay, we're almost at time, but I have one quick follow-up for both of you. Richelle, tell me what you're most excited about for 110 in 2026.
I am most excited about a proprietary measurement tool that we're about to roll out. It is called the Experience Index.
Okay.
And so when you don't have access to the data, which gives you true quantitative analysis, this is going to answer the ask on the qualitative side. So for all of those people that might run incentive travel rewards, or people that are running engagement programs but don't have all of the hard data, this experience index is going to look and tie behavior, sentiment, outcomes all together in an ROE measurement system versus an ROI. So I'm really looking forward to that, and we're going to launch it the first week in January.
Very exciting for you. I'm intrigued. Now, Kim, I understand that you're fairly new at VCA, but why don't you tell us what you're most excited about from an RPI perspective?
Okay, I've been thinking about this, but I have two things, but I'm going to try to make it into one answer so I'm following directions. There's a qualitative and a quantitative piece, I guess I would say.
Okay.
We launched our certified recognition professional updated content last year, and it has been so great because everything we've been talking about with measurement and things, like, it dives deep into recognition strategy to really make sure that we're checking on it. And so it's really great to see what companies are doing when they do this and how it's expanding and helping their recognition strategies. The qualitative piece is our communities. So we talked about industry and benchmarking. We have these roundtables where it doesn't matter what industry you're from, we can just come talk about challenges, recognition professionals that don't always get to talk with others. And so we get to learn from each other in a safe place, and we can be like, I don't know what to do with this, I don't know how that works. And somebody in an airline industry or hospitals or this can share, and you can get ideas. And so I just love that qualitative piece because we're in this evolvement stage that any idea could spark something new, and RPI communities does that for us.
That's great. That's very exciting. And I've attended a lot of RPI events early on in my career with VIBE, and it has always had that kind of community feel. So I'm glad that is continuing, and probably a little bit easier to do now from a distance with the technological tools. So that's great. So as we wrap up today's conversation, I want to say one thing is clear, that the data-driven revolution is here, and it's not about replacing human judgment, it's about strengthening it. And I think we've heard how analytics can bring clarity to program design, how AI can help with personalization experiences at a larger scale, and how thoughtful use of data allows organizations to evolve programs in ways that are more inclusive, effective, and impactful. So it's whether you're just starting out and exploring analytics, or you're already leveraging AI-enabled tools and insights, the takeaway is simple. You must start with curiosity. Got to focus on the metrics that truly matter to you, and you got to let insights guide continuous improvement. And don't forget to keep people at the center of what you do. And if ever you need help and you're not sure where to go, leverage the solution providers like 110 and Richelle and VIBE SMG and myself to help you along. I'd like to thank Kimberly Huffman and Richelle Suver, for sharing their expertise and real-world perspectives today. Thank you for listening to Motivation Insiders. For more insights and resources from the Incentive Marketing Association and the IESP, visit incentivemarketing.org. I'm Carl MacDonald from VIBE SMG. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.